Hello everybody, my name is Sasha. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I will show you a step-by-step tutorial on how to make this beautiful canvas. The tutorial will start in just a minute, but first I wanted to talk about it just a little bit. It took a little over 5 hours to record the tutorial from start to finish, and I tried my best to shorten the video to only 1 hour. So it is going to be a very sped up tutorial, but I tried to explain a lot of steps and details. I talked a lot about how the background was made and a little bit about the basics of building a composition. I didn't get into the details of working on the composition because if I did, this video would end up being twice, if not 3 times longer, and I felt like 1 hour is already long enough. But if you have any questions, you can always leave your comments and I will answer them. I will also write down the list of products I used in the video description and try to leave the links as well. I think that is all I wanted to say. Enjoy watching the tutorial and I hope that you will find it useful. I'm going to start with this sheet right here. It is from the new Magic Spell collection by Prima Marketing. And it is called Magical Season. My canvas is about 9.75 by 11.75 inches in size, so I'm going to cut this sheet approximately 1/8 of an inch larger on each side and adhere it to my canvas. I was using the Distress Collage Medium by Tim Holtz for that, but you can use your favorite paper adhesive as well. Now that my paper is glued onto my canvas, I'm going to work on the edges. I will distress or rough them up using my regular scissors, and because I cut my paper a little longer on each side, the scissors don't touch the canvas while I distress the edges. It's fine if the paper tears a little bit because I want it to have a few tears here and there. Next, I'm going to work on my background, and I am starting with Heavy Gesso. This one is by Prima Marketing in white, and I am using a sponge brush. A regular household sponge will work as well, and I am going to mask up some of the elements on the paper that I don't want to be visible. I am lightly dabbing the gesso onto the paper instead of brushing it. This way it creates a cloudy effect and blends in with the paper design. If you don't have white gesso, you can try to achieve a similar effect just using a regular acrylic paint. Once the layer of gesso has dried up completely, I'm going to apply a crackle paste onto the areas where I applied gesso, and I am using a crackle paste by Tim Holtz for that. You can also use any crackle paste that you prefer. I am applying the crackle paste with the palette knife, and I am sort of dragging it down the paper instead of dabbing it like I did with the gesso. This will help to mask up these areas even more, and it will also create a nice crackle effect that I think will look good on the project like that. I left my canvas drying overnight, and I just want you to take a closer look at the crackle paste once it has been dried. I think it turned out beautifully, exactly as I wanted. I'm going to continue working on the background, and I will need a couple of stencils, texture paste, and embossing powder. I decided to use two stencils. Both are by Tim Holtz, one with small dots that kind of fade away, and the second one with numbers. I also took out two embossing powders. This one is by Stampendos in aged ivory color, and the second one is by Ranger in gold. I'm going to use the dot stencil first, and I'm going to apply an embossing medium through it. This one is a Dabber by Ranger. Now I'm just shaking the gold powder in the areas where I applied the dabber, and the next step I'll use a brush to brush off the excess powder in the areas where there's a lot of it. And now I'm just going to heat it up with an embossing tool, and I'll show you how it looks like once it has been heated. Once the powder has been heated, it is now adds a beautiful golden shine. Some areas did not heat up well, but that's okay because I'm going to apply a texture paste next, so I'll have a chance to heat it up again. I'm going to use a matte opaque texture paste by Ranger. This one is also a Tim Holtz product, and I'm going to apply it through my second stencil. Now I'm spreading the aged ivory powder onto my texture paste while it is still wet, and I'm going to heat it up as well. When you heat up the texture paste, it is going to puff up and we're going to get some volume and texture and color from the embossing powder. My background turned out beautifully. There's that crackle effect, a beautiful golden shine, and the texture of the paste feels and looks amazing. With that, I will finish working on the background and we can move on. We're now moving on to making some elements for the composition. Here I have a few of wood sticks that I picked up at the park, and I will be adding some of them, not all, to my composition. I tried picking different thickness and shapes so that my composition looks more interesting. I'm going to use a heavy gesso as well for my base layer, and here you see me using a sponge brush for that, but a regular brush will work just as well, if not better. You'll get a better coverage with a regular brush for sure. I'm covering all of my sticks with gesso now, even though I said I'm not going to use all of them. I just want to be able to quickly choose the ones that will better fit my composition. The first layer of gesso has dried, and now I'm going to apply a second layer just because the first one didn't give me enough coverage. Once the second layer has dried, I'm going to paint my stick with regular black acrylic paint, and I am diluting the paint with some water. This way we'll be able to see the white color coming through, and this is exactly the effect that I want to get. While my wood sticks are drying, I can now move on to the next elements, which are the frames. I've precasted those using the epoxy resin and one of the Prima molds. I will leave the name or a link to the mold in the description for you guys. These are some frames in different shapes and sizes, and I was using a new epoxy resin to cast these, and I'm not very impressed with the quality of that. The frames have a few tiny bubbles in them, and the color isn't as opaque as I thought it would be. I am used to using a different epoxy resin to cast the molds, and I don't remember the name of it, but I'll also leave a link to it in the description. Here's an example of the frame with the resin that I like using. It dries much faster, and I like the solid white color of the dried resin. The resin that I use now takes about 24 hours to dry, and I casted it about 8 hours ago, and you can still see that it is flexible because it's not finished drying yet. But I can try painting it now. I just need to be very careful and try not to deform it while painting. I'm going to start by applying heavy white gesso as my primer layer first, and then I'm going to color these with black acrylic paint. If you have a black gesso, you can just apply that instead, and you don't have to worry about coloring it with black paint later. I don't have black gesso, so that's why I have to do it this way. Once my paint has dried, I applied a metallic wax in gold color. This one is by Primer Marketing as well. And I applied it onto my frames by sort of rubbing it on with my fingers. A thin brush would work for that as well. This step was not necessary because once I finished applying the wax, I didn't like how dark the frames turned out, so I decided to cover everything up with white gesso using a sponge brush, and we will see that in the next steps. Right now I'm going to apply a little bit of a crackle paste onto that smaller frame to test how it will look like once it's dry, and if I do like the effect, I will be applying it to the rest of the frames. And like I said before, I'm going to mask up that dark color with white gesso using a sponge brush, and once that layer of gesso has dried, I'm going to apply a little bit of the crackle paste here and there to get that crackle effect onto the frames as well. And lastly, once all my layers are dried, I will be reapplying the wax again, and this time I will be using a brush. My frames turned out amazing. I waited until the next day to show you how they look like in the daylight, and I love how the crackle paste looks on the frames and how it will complement the crackle on the background we did earlier. With that, we will move on to the most interesting part of making the canvas, which is building the composition. Because I didn't intend to teach how to build a composition in this tutorial, but rather show you the process of how I do it, I will not be explaining each step in detail, but I will try to cover the basics. Right now I'm looking for a card to place in my rectangle frame, and I think that this one on the envelope is the one. I'm going to cut it and adhere it to the frame using a distressed collage medium instead of a regular glue. I'm trying the collage medium on the epoxy resin for the first time, and I hope it will have a good grip. I think the glue, and I usually use a tacky glue original or a hot glue. I think it will not work well in this case, but I will try this method this time and see how it works. Once everything is glued to the frame, I will place it under the press of the jars to make sure the card sticks to the frame well. So when I build the composition, most of the time I don't have the end result pictured in my mind. Usually I pick the main and largest elements that I want to see in the composition, and in this case they are the wood sticks, the frames, and the witch. You'll see her later in the video. Then I will start layering the main elements out and adding details around them. I am starting with the wood sticks, and I am using the distressed collage medium again to glue them onto the paper. This way I can still move the sticks if I need to while the medium is still drying. You can use a hot glue or a regular glue instead if you're not planning to move things around. You can see me placing flowers under the sticks, and I am doing so to keep the sticks elevated while they are drying and while I'm working on the composition. I will be taking them out once I have enough elements underneath to support the sticks, but for right now the flowers will stay here for temporary support. You can use anything else, by the way. I just have these laying around close, so I use them instead of looking for something else. Right now I'm applying a little bit of the hot glue on the back of this element with an owl. I'm doing so to make the paper flexible and prevent it from bending or tearing, because this element has lots of tiny areas that can be easily bended or even torn apart. Once the paper is covered in glue, I press it onto the glass mat to even out the glue, and when I do that, most of the time a little bit of the glue will leak out, but that's no problem because I can easily cut it off where I don't want it to be visible. Once the main elements are laid out, the next step I usually start placing the flowers, and I am starting with the biggest flowers, placing them on top layers and working my way down, choosing the smaller sized flowers. A good rule of thumb for me in this case, the size of the flowers should decrease as I move further down the layers, and if you think of it from the viewer's perspective, the size of an object should decrease when we look further. Sometimes I can make exclusions, but generally this is how I usually do it. I think most of the process is self-explanatory and you can see what I'm doing. So I will continue with the music on, and if there's anything that I feel like needs more explanation, I will chime in and explain what I did and why I did it. Just a quick note here because I see that I did not capture this on camera, but I am applying a white acrylic paint onto the moon using a sponge. Just another quick note here, I am using a regular acrylic paint to paint the cauldron. My phone died while I was recording, and I only realized it after I've done a few things. So let me just show you what I've done here. I added a little bit of cheesecloth to imitate the spider webs, and I just took the cheesecloth, tore it apart into small uh, bits, and I tucked them in between the layers. And here is the finished canvas. I did make a few edits after I stopped recording, so let me just show you what I did here. First, I changed the position of this black spider. It was sitting on the left side of the flower originally, and then I moved it to the right side and added some bubbles onto the flower. These are Ideology Bubbles by Tim Holtz. And then I also added this card underneath the purple one because I felt like something was missing in this spot, like there was not enough color. And let's just take a closer look at all the layers. Look at this beautiful crackle effect and the gold foiling. I love how each element has its own purpose on the layers and how it all works together as one piece. I know I moved through the composition part very quickly, but I hope it was still not hard to understand what was done. I would love to hear your constructive feedback on the tutorial, things you liked and things you wish were shown in more details. I am just starting to teach and any kind of feedback is appreciated. This will help me improve on my teaching skills for sure. Thank you very much for watching this until the end, and as always, happy crafting. Goodbye.